Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Sit back and listen to interviews, discussion about books, and anything else literary. There's always something or someone new on the show.
Good evening, listeners, and welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast, conversations, revelations, and inspirations behind the book. I'm Amy
Talia Haven.
And it's time for our literary commentary, where you never know where the conversation will lead us. So, it's March already, and it is, normally this is a point where I would say these people have book releases next month. I do know of one that just contacted me. She has a book release, and I just thought of it just now. And her name is Diane Lilly, and her book is coming out on March 12th. And let me see here. It is called The Undead Founders, or Founding Dead, something to that effect. I'm looking at the file that she sent me. So of course her release is on the same day as my surgery, but she wanted some stuff done, and I told her I could schedule most stuff except for posting on Amazon. She'd have to wait until after I'm able to actually use my computer again. So, March is also Women's History Month. Besides me and Talia, who are making history as we speak, there are a lot of people, or a lot of women in the past that some may not have even heard of because they were an author so long ago and a writer. How dare a woman write? Share stories, write something other than cookbooks. Because that was a big thing too. Women, they would write their cookbooks, based off of their family meals. But, sometimes they had to use pen names. And I'm not sure, but it could be, possible that because of some people use, various pen names, so they could either, I know, even now there are authors that will use a pen name that you can't tell whether, the gender of the person, and they like it that way. That's how they do it. And, there's some that, because of what the topics they write on, they want to have a pen name so they can separate that from like their professional career. And then there are people like me who don't really care. But I did have other pen names. I had a male pen name, and I had a female pen name, and the female pen name wrote erotica, and the other pen name wrote thriller erotica, almost to the verge of horror. But, if you read a book, and I don't think it matters whether the author, the gender of the author, you should be more impressed with the writing than, what color the author is, what gender the author is, and things like that.
So when I was doing the research for this, I found Andre Norton. And I was really surprised to find out that the science fiction master of the 1950s was actually born Alice Mary Norton. And as I got digging into this to find out who she really was, do you remember the 1980 movie Beastmaster with Mark Singler?
Yes.
She wrote that book.
Wow.
She wrote The Beastmaster. And when it was made into a movie in the 1980s, according to the article that I read, she was so upset about the liberties that they'd taken with the plot line that
Yeah.
she asked for her name not to be put into the credits. And
Wow.
I read Andre Norton, and I never realized that all this time it was a woman. Yeah.
That is,
Pretty amazing.
yeah, it is. And the thing too, and I can understand, not that any of my books would be turned into movies, but there are creative, I don't know, some of the writers who take the book and then put them into, uh, create a screenplay, um, you know, they're basically doing an adaptation of the book so that way it's not, it's not the book word for word or, scene to
Right.
scene, things like that. So, but I can understand, if they, basically it sounds like they took away her voice, so she's like, nope, not part of it.
Yeah, I'm out of here. Don't put my
Yeah,
name on it. But yeah,
I,
it really surprised me because the Beastmaster in the 80s was very popular. And
yeah,
it was she was very unhappy with it.
wow, that's kind of a bit mind blowing, and it's really interesting too that, so we had, as February came to a close, it's, the end of Black History Month, and then it leads us into March, which is, Women's History, Month, and, of course, women make history every day. African Americans make history every day. White people make history every day. And, some are good and some are not so good considering, the royal family, which I'm not getting into. But, you know, a lot of times too, when people are thinking of women and like history, they're not always thinking about the women who wrote books or, um, were ahead of their time, or sometimes people, unless you really dig for it, you don't know. You've never heard of a woman because maybe she had to have, her husband, do things that she would want to do, but under, like, where she'd be like almost standing behind him and, he would do the things for her, uh, so she could, because he believed in her. Uh,
Yes.
when I was, doing, research for my local history, um, book coming out April 6th, little plug there. But, I found, I mean, my book, even though it's on local history, it's about people and women that, unless you were an ancestor or someone like me digging to find out about the women that weren't talked about, weren't in public records. Um, I had to dig for a lot of information, and I was able to connect with, a couple of the people I did research on, their ancestors that are still around. So, I was able to get some clarification on things too. But, that's what it was. You hide behind a man's name or your
Yeah.
husband, you know.
Yeah. I also got digging around and found Catherine Harris Bradley and her niece, Edith Emma Cooper. And they were a female team who were partners in every sense of the way. They wrote as Michael Fields, and they have over 40 books together. They were in the 1884 era.
Wow.
The most famous play I found is called, and I'm not very good at French pronunciation, so I'm probably going to botch this, Cleohol and the Fair Rosamond. It was published in 1884, and it was basically a play, a very modern, up-to-date, in that era, play about femininity, love, and the new women movement. And they lived together right up until Catherine died of breast cancer, and then Edith died about 9 months later. So they
Oh,
were really cutting edge and, wrote about female same-sex desire books under Michael Fields.
wow. I wonder, even under a male moniker, how that, you know, how did people perceive those books way back then?
Yeah, it would have
Some
been
may have been,
interesting.
yeah, some might have been censoring, things, um, not allow them in their library, definitely not their classrooms, or some would not want their daughters to read them, you know. So I find it very interesting to see how that would have, people now, well, there's nobody alive from them, but
Right.
obviously, they got someone to print it for them, which is, back then that was something in itself.
Mhm.
In doing my own research for, printing presses, a lot of, uh, printing presses, they didn't just print like the newspaper and whatever the, editor would put into it, but they also printed books like tracts and brochures, really small books, that were paperback and um, printed out. Um, and a lot of people, some of them authored their own book because they were in charge of the printing press.
Right. It almost kind of makes you wonder. I'm dating myself. Video stores had the back room. It almost made you wonder if back then, if the bookstores had the back room, where everything in that type of sexuality and erotica and just porn was kept separate from the regular customers coming in with their families and children's and browsing in the stores. It kind of makes you wonder if maybe that was one way that they managed to get into market, is because bookstores in the 1800s had back rooms.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
I should Google that and find out if they actually did have back rooms.
they may have, and there could have been also, I don't know the proper term, but say brothels. Maybe they had those kind of books that were, I know men would go in there for other things, but
Right.
you always, like when you watch old westerns and you see
Oh yeah.
the ladies of the evening, who's to say that, one of their clients wasn't a woman? They
Yeah.
always made it like it was a cowboy, but,
Yeah.
maybe a woman, and didn't want anybody to know about it. It's possible that they could have dressed like a man.
Yep.
There was some, famous, I think it was Annie Oakley, and she was known to wear trousers, because he's first riding a horse with a skirt on. It's not very easy.
Right.
And wasn't about to do it side saddle.
And I do believe she was quite the shot with a rifle too,
Oh,
if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken.
yeah. That's for sure. He left a legacy beyond. And if, you're listening and you are not Gen X, you are younger, you might want to Google Annie Oakley, and then you
Yep.
name that we've already been on. And I did some research. I was very curious about who the earliest uh, known woman author, and I found that it was from 5,000 years ago, and actually it surprised me, but then it didn't surprise me because women, you get women that are they persevere and they keep going and they don't, they knock down obstacles. And even when it was something that, a woman either was meant to be married and have children, and that was her job. If she was single, she basically was a teacher, a secretary, or, uh, something that a server in like a hotel with a restaurant. But the funny part is, though women cooked in their house and they were the ones that had to cook, it was their job to cook, but no women were allowed to be chefs in restaurants.
Right.
So I never understood what the difference was. Why because you're cooking for people who's paying for it, other than you're cooking for your family. And I must say that a lot of mothers and wives, they just they could blow some chefs out of the water with what they are able to do, because a lot of times you're using what you have. And that's what my mom used to do. She used what she had. If she had to, she was really big on, especially when, using Campbell's soup products. And no, I'm not promoting this, or they're not a sponsor or anything, but, and I still have this, I found this cookbook. It's a cookbook of all recipes that you can use different soups for. And my mom was really big on experimenting with, like, adding soup to chicken and rice and all that kind of stuff. And it worked out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people now
Well,
be like, what? Hey,
another author that I found is more of a poet. And she's probably a little bit better known than Andre Norton, actually being a woman, and the two ladies that I talked to previously. Phyllis Wheatley was actually an American slave, and she's a published poet. She was still a slave when she put out her first book called Poems on Various Subjects, Religious and Moral. She had gone to England with her owners, the Wheeleys, in London, and she had actually got the backing of the Duchess of, the Countess of Huntington and the Duke of Dartmouth. They helped promote and get her first book published. Boston would have nothing to do with it because that's where they were from. So
right.
they took her to London, and, she had met some people, and, she actually did not meet the Countess, because she was ill. The Countess was at the time. But, yeah, she was actually a slave and owned by the Wheeleys when she published her first book. And she
So,
was very, very popular in Boston. She would speak at socials and things and recite her poetry, but they
wow,
would never publish her.
of course not. So her owners,
Yep.
they saw her potential, and they did this, they helped her out. They brought her to, so they
Yes.
were like supporting her
Yep.
in her work.
Well, what had happened is she was about 7 years old when she came into America. And they bought her, and they called her Phyllis because she came in on the boat, the Phyllis. And in the times they all took the owner's last name.
Right.
Well, the older kids of the family actually started playing around with chalk and was starting to teach her to read and write.
Nice.
Well, the family saw the talent that she had, and they actually, she wasn't a servant in the sense of being a servant. She was a servant to the mother, but she didn't do actual physical or manual labor like you would consider that the servants in the household did. She was
Right.
actually taught and educated, and when they discovered she was a poet, she started running the circles. I mean, they would take her, and she'd actually wrote a letter to George Washington. I'm not really sure what it was about, but she did write him a letter, and she did get her freedom. About the year after her book was done, they give her her freedom, and she married a very poor grocer who died in debtor's prison back then, and she never recovered because of their poverty, and she was actually buried. They don't know where she's buried. She's buried in an unmarked grave. But there was no surviving children. All of her children died, and her daughter um died shortly after she did, after the birth of her third child. But yeah, she was the first African American slave to ever publish. I thought that was always fascinating.
Wow. And it kind of, it's intriguing and sad all wrapped in one.
Yes. Yeah,
I mean,
it is a tragic story.
yeah, I, and I know, and I've, read of, people who have, you know, it was commonplace to have slaves, um, and, most of the time it was African American slaves, but, you all know Columbus took Native American slaves,
Yep.
and some were to use as servants, some were treated terribly. They were there for the pleasure of the abuse that could be inflicted on them. But there were people that, you know, they treated their slaves like people.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
slavery is as old as time. I mean, we can go back millions of thousands of years, or let's say, I don't know about millions, but thousands and thousands of years, and still have incidences of slavery. I mean, it's so old that,
yeah,
it's tragic that a majority, and doing some research on slavery in the ancient times, people would actually sell themselves into slavery because it was a better life. They
yeah,
had shelter, they had food, they had clothes, they had security, and a lot of people actually willingly sold themselves into families for that sense of security.
yeah, and it kind of makes sense too. I mean, because even when you think about like nowadays, um, well, I've heard of like in the winter months, some homeless people will commit a petty crime so they can spend the winter in jail
Yeah,
because they have free meals and a cot and a roof over their head
yep,
for the winter months because it's just too darn cold. Right
yep.
now, no one else. I like crazy outside my window.
I actually got green grass.
Oh, well, lucky you.
Hate to brag, sorry.
That's okay. I don't mind. I'm like, yeah, okay. I ain't stopping. So, yep. But yeah, just the way, it's remarkable that, a lot of people say, oh yeah, he was terrible because he, you know, owned slaves and this and that. And like George Washington had slaves. Um, when I did my research on local people, um, there were, uh, it was just that's what they did. They had slaves most of the time. The man would have his own slave, and woman would have hers, and usually it depended on the type of people they were that owned them.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
of how they were treated. And uh, there was this one general who, during the American Revolution, his whole him and his neighbors and some were killed. The British and the Iroquois Indians, Native Americans, um, decided to raid homes of these people, and some they killed, and they took some hostage, but they also took some of the slaves hostage as well.
Yep.
And a lot of times it was like they only had the first name, you know.
Yep.
And when you mentioned that they took on the last name, it's like I've seen years of lots of different census records, and if they had a slave, it had a first name, or it didn't have any, say, how many slaves they had in their house. It was just, normal for the time.
Yep.
And, not everybody that was a slave was African American or Native American.
Nope.
Those were mainly the ones that were. So unfortunately, uh, it's still, now there's new versions of slaves with human trafficking and things like that. So yay, we've come so far.
Yeah. And I guess there's active slave markets in some of the African nations. I'm not really sure what ones they are, but there are active slave markets in just a few of the African nations.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I mean, when you think about that, uh, how the different wars they had in Africa, and the treatment of, the majority of Africans they're black, with a very small majority being white, and
Mm-hmm.
yet some whites think they still have some type of power over other people, and that's what they like. And really, that kind of behavior can go for any race, any color, any gender, and culture. You know,
Yep.
they think, okay, I have power, so I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. And unfortunately, people are still being bought and sold and used until they're no longer useful. So how's that for women's history?
I think we covered a pretty good gender of women.
I think so too. Did you have any, yeah, calls
Submission
for
calls. Yes, I do. This
great.
month we are going to talk about Hellbound books. They do anthologies. They have a wide range of different types of anthologies. Some of them actually have dates where it states on the guideline where it says that nothing will be read until the date. The 10th anniversary of horror has a deadline and only reads after the deadline of, I believe, June of this year. They are a paying anthology and they do buy first rights. Some of them are set up to where it tells you exactly how to submit. Some of them will read right away, and like I said, some of them won't. But they do buy first rights, and there's a wide variety to choose from if you write horror. They ask for originals. no reprints. So if you've got anything that you're looking for a home for that runs in these guidelines, and some of them are like 120,000 words, some are less. So, you kind of got to scroll through and take a look to see what they're offering.
Right.
Also, Chicken Soup of the Soul is a good play-in market, and they're looking for humorists right now, for anything that's funny. So
Yep.
if you've got something that's cute, that's funny, that's a little quirky, Chicken Soup of the Soul is looking, and you can Google them and check out their website. They are also a pay-in market. And that's what I got for this month.
Great. So I think we can wrap up now. It's the end of another great conversation. Thank you, Talia, for being here on the first month, and thank you, audience, for listening. If you wish to be a guest on the show, go to amysbookshopreviews.com/podcast and schedule your free recording. Don't forget, if you wish to comment on this show or any show, comments are available, and yes, I will read them. Please join me next week for another great conversation. Follow this podcast on Spotify, and if you want to check out my work, just Google me. I'm Amy Shannon. Be safe, be well, and always be kind.
Tune in here again next week for another tantalizing discussion. Thank you for listening to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast.